My parents left me with nothing. Now they're furious. I won the lottery. There was a time when I thought I was invisible. Not in the supernatural sense, not like the ghosts that haunt old houses or the figures that lurk in the periphery of nightmares. No, my invisibility was more insidious than that. It was the kind of erasure that happens slowly, over years, until one day you wake up and realize you have been reduced to a shadow in your own family, a barely acknowledged presence, a lingering afterthought. I was the child they didn't see. Not in the way they saw my siblings, their golden ones, the ones whose names were spoken with pride, whose achievements were framed and displayed on the walls of our home like sacred relics. I was never the one called to the dinner table first, never the one they introduced to friends with a beaming smile. I was there, but I wasn't there. And when the time came for my parents to divide what they had, when they stood before their children and parceled out their wealth like gods bestowing favors, I was given nothing. No inheritance, no savings, no carefully prepared safety net. They made their choice clear, their reasoning cutting in its simplicity. You don't deserve it. No explanations, no discussions, just those 4 words. I left that day with nothing but the weight of their dismissal, the quiet knowledge that I had been deemed unworthy not just of their love, but of their very legacy. I walked away without looking back, because looking back would have meant acknowledging the finality of it, the deep, irreversible truth. I was not, and never had been, their priority. But fate has a twisted sense of humor, because months later, when I least expected it, when I had long since accepted that I would always be struggling, always be clawing my way forward alone, I bought a lottery ticket on a whim, a small rebellion against the endless grind of barely making ends meet, a moment of reckless hope in an otherwise bleak reality. And then, I won. Not a small sum, not a fleeting amount that would be gone in a few extravagant purchases. No, I won a life-altering fortune, the kind of money that turns heads, that shifts power, that redefines relationships overnight. In an instant, I went from being overlooked to being someone who mattered. And that was when the calls started. The first time my mother called me, I didn't answer. I stared at the screen, watched as her name flickered across it, felt the bitter amusement curl in my stomach. The same mother who had looked at me with nothing but indifference the last time we spoke. The same mother who had stood beside my father as he signed away their wealth to everyone but me. I let it go to voicemail. The second time, it was my father. His voice, always so sure, so filled with unshakable authority, was now laced with something else. A hesitation, a forced warmth, an attempt at casual conversation that was so unlike him it was almost laughable. "We heard the news," he said, as if I were some distant acquaintance, as if we were catching up over coffee instead of acknowledging the seismic shift that had just occurred. "It's wonderful, really. We always knew you had potential." Potential? That was the word he chose? Not "we're proud of you," not "we're sorry for how we treated you." Just potential, as if my success had somehow been inevitable, despite the fact that they had done everything in their power to ensure I never got the chance to thrive. I deleted the message without replying. But they didn't stop. The calls became more frequent. Then came the texts, long, rambling messages filled with carefully constructed words, the kind of emotional manipulation that had once worked so well on me. They spoke of family, of how money should be shared, of how we take care of each other, as if they had ever taken care of me. And then, finally, they stopped pretending. "You owe us." Those were the words that finally broke through the mask, the polite facade they had been trying to maintain. A direct message from my father, as blunt as it was entitled. Not a request, a demand. I stared at those 3 words for a long time, letting them sink in, feeling the slow, burning anger coil inside me. I owe them. I owe them. For what? For a childhood spent being treated like an afterthought? For years of watching my siblings be celebrated while I was barely acknowledged? For the day they signed away everything they had to everyone but me, looking me in the eye as they told me I wasn't worthy? I exhaled slowly, pressing my phone against my palm. They had spent my entire life teaching me what it meant to be discarded. Now, it was my turn to return the favor. I finally agreed to meet them. Not because I wanted reconciliation, not because I sought closure, but because I wanted to see the desperation in their eyes. I wanted to look them in the face and watch them squirm under the weight of their own hypocrisy. We met at the house I had grown up in, the same house where I had spent years being ignored, the same house where decisions had been made about my worth, about my place in this family. They greeted me with forced smiles, my mother's arms outstretched as if she expected an embrace. I didn't move. "Darling," she said, her voice thick with artificial sweetness. "It's so good to see you." I let the silence stretch between us before answering. "Cut the bullshit." Her smile faltered. My father, ever the pragmatist, folded his arms. "We're still family," he said, his voice carrying that same authoritative weight he had always used to silence me. "And family should take care of each other." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Like how you took care of me?" His expression flickered, just for a moment, before he recovered. "We made a mistake," he admitted. "But now, you have a chance to fix things, to do the right thing." I smiled then, slow, sharp, something cold curling at the edges of my lips. "I'm willing to help," I said. My mother let out a relieved breath, my father's posture loosening slightly. "But," I continued, letting the word drag out, "I have conditions." They exchanged glances. My father narrowed his eyes. "What conditions?" I tilted my head, watching them like a predator sizing up its prey. "I want everything back. Every cent you gave my siblings, every asset you signed away. I want it all." My mother gasped. "That's ridiculous." I ignored her. "And in return, I'll consider giving you a small percentage of my winnings, enough to keep you comfortable, but nothing more." My father's face darkened. "That's extortion." I laughed, the sound hollow. "No, it's justice." Silence settled between us. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. My father's hands clenched into fists at his sides. They had spent their entire lives holding power over me, dictating my worth, controlling what I could and couldn't have. And now, they were the ones begging. The balance had shifted, and I was never giving it back. My parents had always carried themselves with a quiet arrogance, a certainty that they were the ones who set the rules, who decided who was worthy and who was not. They had built their lives around control, financial control, emotional control, the quiet, insidious manipulation that kept everyone orbiting around them like planets trapped in the pull of a dying star. And they were the ones scrambling. They sat before me, their carefully constructed facades cracking at the edges, their expressions tight with the weight of their own greed. My father's jaw was clenched so tightly I could hear his teeth grind. My mother was shifting in her chair, hands wringing together, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her own skin. I had given them an offer. Not a gift, not charity, but a transaction. I would consider sharing my wealth, but only if they gave me back everything they had denied me. My father was the first to break the silence. "You don't understand what you're asking," he said, voice low, measured, as if he was trying to hold on to whatever authority he still believed he had over me. "This isn't about money. It's about family." I smiled, slow and sharp, letting the weight of his own hypocrisy hang between us. "Oh? Now it's about family?" His eyes darkened. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Funny how it wasn't about family when you gave away everything to my siblings, when you left me with nothing." My mother let out a soft, forced laugh, her voice dripping with false warmth. "We never left you with nothing, darling." I tilted my head. "Oh? What did you leave me with then?" Her mouth opened and closed, but she had no answer. Because the truth was, they had never once considered what they had done to me. They had never stopped to think about what it meant to watch my brothers and sisters handed houses, cars, savings accounts while I was pushed to the side, an afterthought, a child deemed unworthy of their legacy. I could see it now, the way realization was beginning to sink in. They had always assumed I would accept my fate, that I would struggle, suffer, but ultimately remain powerless. They had never considered what would happen if I was the one holding the cards, and they were struggling to reconcile that now. "You're being unreasonable," my father finally snapped, his mask slipping, revealing the frustration beneath. "Am I?" I asked. "Or are you just not used to someone telling you no?" His nostrils flared. My mother placed a hand on his arm, trying to calm him, but I could see the cracks forming. They were losing control, and they knew it. "You have to understand," my mother said, her voice suddenly softer, careful. "It was never about favoritism. We did what was best for the family." I let out a short, hollow laugh. "Best for who exactly?" "For everyone," she said quickly, though there was something in her voice now. Something hesitant, a slight waver that hadn't been there before. A lie. It wasn't unusual. My parents had always been good at lying, at shifting blame, at twisting reality to suit their needs. But this time I wasn't a child. I wasn't someone they could dismiss with a well-practiced excuse. I was watching them closely, and I saw it. The flicker of something deeper behind my mother's expression. Guilt. Not regret. No, that was too much to hope for. But guilt. A crack in the foundation of their carefully constructed reasoning. There was something they weren't saying. Something more. My father cleared his throat, his fingers drumming against the wooden table. "Look," he said, exhaling sharply. "We can't give you back what we gave to your siblings. That money is gone. The properties? Not in our names anymore. The investments? They've already been passed down." I raised an eyebrow. "Then I guess you don't get a cent of my money either." My mother sucked in a breath. "Please, we need this." I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch. Let them sit in it. Let them feel what it was like to beg for something they would never receive. And then I saw it. The moment my father cracked. The way his fingers curled against his palm, his mouth pressing into a thin line. His control was slipping, unraveling by the second. And when he spoke next, his words came fast, sharp, angry. "We did everything for you," he spat. "And this is how you repay us?" I exhaled through my nose, a slow, deliberate breath. "You did everything for me?" "Yes!" My mother jumped in, her voice growing shrill. "You don't know how much we protected you, the sacrifices we made." I held up a hand, cutting her off. I was done listening to the lies. "You want to talk about sacrifices?" I said, my voice quieter now, but no less deadly. "Let's talk about that then." I stood up slowly, pacing the length of the room, letting the weight of my next words settle in. "You sacrificed me so my siblings could have everything. You decided I wasn't worth the effort. You didn't protect me. You abandoned me." I turned, staring directly at them, daring them to deny it. "And now? Now that I don't need you anymore. Now that I have something you want, suddenly I'm important again?" My mother swallowed hard. My father's jaw twitched, and then, finally, the truth broke free. "We didn't have a choice," my mother blurted. I stilled. Something in her tone, something raw, sent a chill down my spine. I narrowed my eyes. "What do you mean?" She looked at my father, as if realizing she had said too much. He shook his head slightly, his lips pressing into a thin line, a silent command to stay quiet. But it was too late. I had seen it. The fear, the truth. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "What are you not telling me?" My mother let out a shaky breath, gripping the edge of the table as if grounding herself. "You weren't—" She stopped, shaking her head. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." My stomach tightened. "Like what?" She swallowed, hard. "You weren't supposed to inherit anything." The words landed like a punch to the gut. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Why?" My father stood abruptly. "Enough." But I wasn't done. I turned to my mother, my voice steel. "Why?" She hesitated, and then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "Because you're not really one of us." The world tilted. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And then, like a dam breaking, I understood. I had always wondered why I was different, why I had never been enough for them, why I had been treated like an outsider in my own home. And now, I had my answer. I wasn't their child. I was something else. Something they had hidden. The lottery had only exposed the lie. My entire life had been built on a secret I was never supposed to uncover. And now, they were terrified. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of it settle, feeling the rage simmer beneath my skin. They wanted my money, but they had just given me something far more valuable, the truth. And I was going to make them pay for it. I stared at my mother, the weight of her confession pressing down on my chest like an iron hand. The room around me faded into a dull, distant hum. My father's face was tight with silent fury. his fists clenched at his sides as if he could will the words back into my mother's mouth. But the damage had already been done. I wasn't one of them. A hollow laugh bubbled in my throat, but it came out strangled, sharp. "Say that again," I said, my voice cold and steady, though inside something was cracking wide open. "Say it clearly." My mother's lower lip trembled. She stopped, took a breath, and forced herself to look at me. "We took you in." The words were meant to sound kind, like some grand act of charity, but all they did was solidify what I had always felt deep in my bones. I was never meant to belong. I exhaled slowly, my fingers curling at my sides. "Took me in?" I repeated, letting the words roll off my tongue like venom. "So I'm not your child?" My father turned away, jaw tightening, as if refusing to answer would make it less real. But my mother, she was unraveling, her carefully constructed mask slipping with each passing second. "We raised you," she said, almost pleading. "We gave you a home. We tried." "Tried what exactly?" My voice was like glass, brittle and razor sharp. "Tried to pretend I wasn't an inconvenience? Tried to justify why you treated me like I didn't matter?" She let out a shaky breath. "It wasn't like that." I laughed then, bitter and hollow. It was exactly like that. My mind was spinning, pieces clicking into place like jagged glass settling into an ugly mosaic. The favoritism, the way I had always been the afterthought, the way they had so easily written me out of their will as if I was never meant to receive anything in the first place. Because I wasn't. I wasn't theirs. And now I needed to know everything. I crossed my arms, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Who are my real parents?" My mother flinched, her fingers tightening around the hem of her dress. She looked at my father, but he remained stone-faced, silent, so it was up to her. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. "Your mother..." She hesitated. "She was someone we knew. A friend. She got pregnant young. She wasn't ready to be a mother." My pulse pounded. "And my father?" A pause, then, "She never told us." Lies. I could hear it in the way her voice wavered, in the way her eyes darted away. There was more, something deeper, something they were still hiding. I stepped forward, my voice dangerously low. "Tell me the truth." Silence. And then, my father exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face, looking older than I had ever seen him. When he finally spoke, his voice was resigned. "Your father was someone important. Too important." My breath caught in my throat. He met my gaze then, his eyes steeled with something I couldn't quite place. "If people knew who you really were, it would have ruined everything." My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "What are you saying?" My mother placed a hand over her mouth, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "We had to keep it secret." The room seemed to shrink, the air thick and suffocating. I could barely process what they were telling me. A hidden past. A name that could have ruined everything. And yet, even as the truth settled over me, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Because finally, I understood. I was never the problem. They had never ignored me because I was unworthy. They had done it because they were afraid. Afraid of what I represented. Afraid of what I could have been if they had acknowledged my true parentage. And now? Now, they were afraid for a different reason. I was the one in control. I exhaled, slow and measured, letting the silence stretch between us. My parents? No. The people who raised me sat before me, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. They wanted my money. But they had given me something far more valuable, the truth. And now, I was going to make them pay for it. I stepped forward, watching the way they stiffened, waiting, hoping for some kind of mercy. "I want nothing from you," I said, my voice quiet but lethal. My mother's breath hitched. "Please." "No," I cut her off, my tone absolute. "You don't get to beg now. You don't get to pretend that you care about me." My father's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're being irrational." I tilted my head. "No," I said simply. "I'm being fair." His nostrils flared. "You can't just cut us off." I smiled, slow and sharp. "Watch me." And then, Just for good measure, I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice to a whisper. "You taught me how to walk away," I said, my words laced with the weight of years of neglect. "Now I'm just returning the favor." I turned on my heel, my pulse steady, my chest light. I was the one leaving them behind. I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, a penthouse overlooking the city, a view I had once only dreamed of. The air was crisp, the scent of rain lingering from a passing storm. I took a sip of my drink, savoring the quiet. No calls, no desperate messages. My parents had finally understood. I had cut them off completely, severed the last remaining thread that had once bound me to them. And despite everything, despite the years of longing, of waiting for them to see me, I felt nothing but peace. They had left me with nothing. Now, they had nothing of me. And that, I realized, was worth more than any amount of money. My family forgot my birthday for 10 years. Now they're furious I didn't invite them to my celebration. There was a time when I used to count down the days. I would mark them on the calendar with hopeful, childish excitement, circling the date in bright colors as if making it stand out would make them see me. My birthday had always been more than just a day. It was supposed to be proof that I mattered, that I wasn't invisible. But the years came and went, and the celebrations never arrived. No candles, no cake, no off-key singing from family members pretending to be embarrassed. No presents, no cards, no last-minute texts from a sibling who almost forgot but caught themselves just in time. No one remembered. The first time it happened, I told myself it was a mistake. People got busy. Life was chaotic. Maybe it just slipped their minds. The second time, I made excuses for them. The third, the fourth, the fifth. I swallowed my disappointment, telling myself it didn't matter, that it wasn't a big deal. By the time I reached the 10th year, I had stopped pretending. I wasn't an idiot. I saw how they treated my siblings. The extravagant parties, the heartfelt speeches, the carefully wrapped gifts with crisp ribbons and thoughtful notes. I saw the way my parents would beam with pride, the way my aunts and uncles would go out of their way to make the day special. Just not for me. I tried to push the bitterness away, tried to convince myself that birthdays weren't important. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't about the day itself. It was about what it meant. And what it meant was that I didn't matter to them. So I stopped waiting. This year I celebrated on my own terms. I planned it for months. I booked a venue, something elegant but warm, where the people who actually cared about me could gather. I spared no expense. Why should I? For once I wanted to feel what it was like to be at the center of something, to be celebrated the way I should have been all along. My friends showed up in full force. The people who had stood by me when my own family couldn't be bothered. The ones who remembered without being reminded, who didn't need some obligation or forced familial bond to care. The night was everything I had dreamed of as a child. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses as toasts were made in my honor. The air buzzed with warmth, with the kind of love that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. And then, the messages started. At first, they were subtle. A missed call from my mother, a text from my sister, short and clipped. "Did you have a party?" I ignored them. But as the night went on, as pictures surfaced online, as mutual acquaintances casually mentioned the event, the floodgates burst open. "Mom, I can't believe this. You had a party and didn't invite your own family?" "Dad, this is beyond disrespectful. We are your parents. We deserve to be there." "Aunt Linda, your mother is in tears. She just found out about the party. Why would you do this to her?" "My sister, Sophia. Are you serious? You didn't even think to invite us? After everything we've done for you?" I stared at the messages, a slow, cold amusement curling through me. "After everything we've done for you." The sheer hypocrisy of it made me laugh. I took another sip of my drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass, the warmth of the party still buzzing around me. This was the first year I hadn't spent my birthday waiting. And now, suddenly, they cared. By the time I got home that night, the calls had become relentless. My voicemail was full, my phone vibrating every few seconds with another incoming message. The notifications stacked on top of each other. Missed calls, angry texts, attempts at guilt tripping me into submission. But it wasn't until the next morning that things escalated. A knock at the door. I knew who it was before I even looked. For a brief moment I considered ignoring it. Let them stand out there, waiting, just like I had waited for them. Let them wonder how it felt to be forgotten. But I was done hiding. I swung the door open, arms crossed, my expression carefully neutral. My mother stood in the doorway, her face tight with something between anger and betrayal. My father loomed behind her, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his jaw clenched. My sister was there too, arms folded, looking like she had bitten into something sour. They stared at me, and for the first time in my life I saw it. The realization that I wasn't the quiet, forgotten child anymore. That I wasn't waiting for their approval. And they hated it. My mother was the first to speak. "How could you?" I blinked. "How could I? What?" Her nostrils flared. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. A birthday party? A huge celebration? And you didn't invite your own family?" I let the silence stretch between us, letting her words settle under their own weight. Then I shrugged. "You never cared about my birthday before. Why start now?" She recoiled like I had slapped her. "That's not true." I arched a brow. "Really? When was the last time you wished me a happy birthday?" A flicker of hesitation. My father shifted beside her, looking away. Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it. That was all the answer I needed. I laughed, shaking my head. "You don't even remember, do you? 10 years, 10 birthdays, not a single call, not a single text. Meanwhile, I've watched you celebrate everyone else. I've watched you go above and beyond for my siblings, for our cousins, for family friends, for people you barely even know. But not me." My mother's face twisted. "That's not fair." I tilted my head. "No? Then tell me. Why did you forget? Why was I always the afterthought?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stepped forward, my voice lower now, sharper. "You don't get to be angry. You don't get to act like victims. You had 10 years to show me I mattered to you. And now, suddenly, when I stop waiting, when I stop begging for scraps, you're furious." My father exhaled sharply, finally speaking. "We're your family." I met his gaze, unwavering. "Then why didn't you act like it?" Silence. The wind stirred between us, cool against my skin. Finally my mother spoke again, quieter this time. "We made mistakes." I let out a slow breath, nodding. "Yes, you did." I could see it now, the cracks in them, the way the truth was finally settling in. They had spent years convincing themselves that I would always be there, that I would always forgive, always come back, always accept whatever little attention they decided to throw my way. They had never considered the possibility that I would leave them behind, and that was exactly what I was going to do. I stepped back, my hand on the door. "I'm done waiting for you to care. I spent too many years hoping you'd see me, but I see myself just fine now. And so do the people who actually matter." My mother swallowed. "So, that's it?" I nodded once. "That's it." Then, without another word, I shut the door. I expected them to leave. For a long moment, after the door clicked shut, there was silence. No yelling, no pounding on the wood, no more self-righteous accusations. I stood there, my breath slow and even, listening, waiting. But then, the knock came, a single, deliberate sound, and then another. I sighed. Of course, they weren't done yet. I turned, running a hand through my hair, debating whether or not I had the patience for this. The answer was no, but I also knew my family well enough to understand that if I didn't deal with them now, they'd just escalate. The guilt-tripping texts would turn into unwanted visits, the passive-aggressive messages from extended relatives, the sudden phone calls from aunts and uncles who had conveniently decided to care the moment I set a boundary. I wasn't in the mood for a war. So, against my better judgment, I opened the door. My mother's face was tight, her jaw clenched like she was holding back the urge to lash out. My father had crossed his arms, his gaze unreadable, his presence looming beside her like a shadow. My sister Sophia leaned against the porch railing, scrolling through her phone, feigning disinterest. But the tension in her posture gave her away. I didn't speak. I simply stared, waiting. It was my father who broke first. "Let's talk." I leaned against the doorframe, unimpressed. "We just did." His lips pressed into a thin line. Don't be difficult. I raised an eyebrow. I'm being difficult. A slow laugh escaped me, the sound low and bitter. That's rich, coming from the people who forgot I existed for a decade but are now throwing a tantrum because they missed out on a party. Sophia sighed, finally tucking her phone away. Look, we get it. You're mad. I cut her off with a sharp glance. Mad? Oh no, Sophia, I was mad years ago. Now, I just don't care. She frowned, shifting her weight. Then why are you making such a big deal out of this? A humorless smile tugged at my lips. I threw myself one party, after 10 years of silence. And you're the ones who showed up at my house acting like I burned the family tree down. I tilted my head. Tell me, which one of us is making a big deal out of this? Sophia didn't have an answer for that. My mother exhaled, rubbing at her temples like this conversation was an inconvenience rather than the consequence of her own neglect. This isn't productive, she murmured, mostly to herself. Then, lifting her gaze to mine, she softened her tone. The kind of careful, measured voice people used when they were trying to diffuse a situation without actually admitting they were wrong. We should have remembered your birthday, she said. We should have done better, and I'm sorry for that. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from her. And yet, it wasn't enough, because it wasn't real. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she was already waiting for me to accept it, to move on, to let it go like 10 years of erasure could be washed away by one half-hearted admission of guilt. She didn't actually feel remorse. She just didn't like the consequences of what she had done. I folded my arms, my expression unreadable. Why did you forget? She blinked. What? You heard me. I leaned in slightly. Tell me why. An uncomfortable pause. My father's jaw tightened. Sophia looked away. My mother shifted, her fingers twisting together. It wasn't intentional. I scoffed. So you just accidentally forgot my birthday every year for a decade? That's one hell of a coincidence. She bristled. We never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice flat. And the worst part? You still haven't answered my question. Another pause. This time, heavier. And then finally my father spoke. It wasn't a coincidence. My mother's head snapped toward him, a sharp warning in her eyes, but he ignored her. His gaze remained locked onto mine, and I saw something beneath his usual stoicism, something almost like regret. I narrowed my eyes. Go on. My father exhaled. Your birthday. Wasn't an easy day for us. I frowned. What does that even mean? A long, weighted silence. Then, soft, hesitant, my mother spoke. It was the day we lost him. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. Lost who? She swallowed. Your brother. For a moment, my brain refused to process the words. Your brother. I let out a sharp, confused breath. I stopped, shaking my head. What the hell are you talking about? I don't have a brother. My father's expression remained unreadable. You did. The air around us felt suddenly suffocating. My skin prickled. My heart beat a dull, uneasy rhythm in my ears. They weren't lying. I could see it now, in the way they refused to meet my eyes, in the quiet grief that had settled into their features. A brother, one I had never known, one who had died on the day I was born. My mother took a shaky breath. He was only 3. A car accident. We were on our way to the hospital. I was in labor. And then... She trailed off, her voice cracking. We lost him. And we brought you home instead. The weight of the revelation hit me like a slow-moving wreck, the pieces clicking together in ways I had never considered before. Why they never celebrated my birthday. Why they never acknowledged it at all. Why no matter how much I tried to make them see me, I always felt like a shadow in my own home. I had spent years wondering what I had done to deserve their indifference, but it had never been about me. I wasn't forgotten. I was resented. My stomach twisted. You blamed me. My mother flinched. No, yes, I snapped. Maybe not consciously, maybe not in a way you could admit to yourselves, but you did. You looked at me, and all you saw was what you lost. Tears welled in my mother's eyes. It wasn't your fault, but you treated me like it was. My voice was eerily calm, steady in a way that made them both shift uncomfortably. For 10 years you made sure I knew that I didn't matter, and now, Because you finally had to face the consequences. Because I stopped waiting for you, you suddenly care. Neither of them had an answer for that. The silence stretched between us, thick with things that could never be undone. I let out a slow breath, stepping back toward the door. I get it now, I murmured. And I'll be honest, knowing doesn't make it better. It just makes it worse. My father exhaled heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. My mother wiped at her eyes. Sophia for once said nothing. I shook my head. You should leave. My mother looked like she wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to say. Without another word, I closed the door. And this time, I didn't expect them to knock again. For a long time after I shut the door, I just stood there. The weight of what I had just learned settled into my bones like a slow, creeping frost. A brother, a sibling I had never known, whose absence had shaped my entire existence without me even realizing it. It explained so much, but it didn't excuse a damn thing. I moved toward the window, carefully peeling back the curtain to watch my family on the porch. My mother stood there, unmoving, staring at the ground like she was trying to will herself into disappearing. My father had his hands on his hips, his jaw set, his expression unreadable. Sophia was pacing, biting her nails, frustration radiating off her in waves. They weren't leaving. I sighed, rubbing at my temple. I could already feel the beginning of a headache creeping in, the kind that only came from dealing with them. I had half a mind to let them stand out there, let them feel what it was like to be ignored, to be an afterthought, just like I had been for years. But I knew them too well. If I didn't finish this now, they'd keep coming back. They'd turn themselves into martyrs, painting me as the cruel, ungrateful child who abandoned them when they were only trying to make things right. They'd rally the rest of the family, twist the story into something that made them the victims, made me the villain. No, I wouldn't give them that power. If this was going to end, it was going to end my way. I opened the door again, stepping out onto the porch, arms crossed. The air between us was thick, charged with unspoken things, with years of neglect and resentment hanging like a storm cloud. You're still here, I said flatly. My mother flinched at my tone, but my father squared his shoulders. We need to talk. I let out a slow breath, nodding. Fine, talk. He hesitated, clearly expecting more resistance. But when I didn't move, he took a step forward. What you said inside, about us blaming you, you were wrong. I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Was I? His lips pressed together, frustration flickering across his features. We didn't resent you. We didn't mean to treat you differently. I laughed, short and sharp. Intent doesn't matter. Impact does. Sophia let out an exasperated breath. Do you have to make everything a fight? I turned to her, leveling her with a cold stare. This isn't a fight. This is me telling you the truth, and you not liking it. She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. I shifted my focus back to my parents. So what do you want? An apology from me for not inviting you to my party? Because that's not happening. My mother shook her head. No, that's not... She stopped, struggling to find the words. We don't want things to be like this. I scoffed. You don't want things to be like this? You don't want to be estranged from your own child? Maybe you should have thought about that before you ignored me for 10 years. My mother swallowed hard, her hands twisting together. It wasn't on purpose. You keep saying that, I said coolly, but you still haven't explained why. If I was a reminder of what you lost, if you couldn't bear to celebrate my birthday because of him, why didn't you just tell me? Why did you let me spend years wondering what the hell was wrong with me? Why did you let me believe I didn't matter to you? My mother opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because there was no good answer to that. Finally, my father sighed. We should have told you the truth a long time ago. We handled it wrong. We didn't know how to process it, and instead of dealing with our grief, He exhaled heavily, shaking his head. We failed you. It was the first time he had ever admitted it. For a long moment I just stood there, staring at him, waiting for the anger to come rushing back, waiting for the years of resentment to demand retribution. But it didn't. I felt tired. Tired in a way that went deeper than just exhaustion, a weariness that stretched back years, that lived in my bones, in my blood. It had taken so long to get here. Too long. I let out a slow breath, my voice quieter this time. You can't undo what you did. You can't rewrite history. I spent 10 years learning to live without you. My gaze swept over them, steady and unwavering. And I'm not going back to being that forgotten kid waiting for scraps of attention. Sophia's brows furrowed. So what? You're just gonna cut us off forever? I tilted my head. Would that be unfair? She hesitated. No, but you don't like the idea of it, I finished for her. Now you understand how I felt every single year when I realized I wasn't important enough to be remembered. She flinched. My mother stepped forward, tentative. Can we fix this? I let the question hang between us, tasting the weight of it. Could they fix this? Could I ever trust them again? Finally, I sighed. I don't know. My mother looked pained, but she nodded. That's fair. My father studied me, his expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, he said, If you ever decide you want to try, we'll be here. I didn't answer right away. I just met his gaze, searching for something. Sincerity, regret, maybe even a hint of real change. And I thought I saw it. It didn't erase the past. It didn't make up for everything they had done. But maybe, just maybe, it was enough to leave the door open, even if just a crack. I nodded once. We'll see. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an invitation. But it was an answer. And for now, that was enough.